and state into the chat box or institution. We would appreciate you doing that so we know who's here with us. And as I said, Becky and I will be monitoring the chat box during the webinar, so if you have any questions or any issues, please let us know. We really appreciate you being with us here today. And now I'm very happy to turn this webinar over to Missouri State Archivist and CoSA President John Dugan, who is going to be the moderator of today's webinar. John?
Thank you, Barbara. I think our last presenter has joined us, but he doesn't have our audio turned on yet. But we're going to go ahead and get started with today's seminar. So I want to formally welcome you to What's on Tap for the Council of State Archivists for this year. The next slide actually shows what today's agenda is going to be. I think that is the presenter, so I must have my slides out of order, but that's the order of presentation for today. And like Barbara said, we have a lot to cover today. So I think then the next slide is the agenda, which includes this welcome. And we plan to just move forward from one presenter to the next and move right straight through the agenda today. So if there are any questions, like Barbara said, please type them in the chat box to the right. And you can type them in now, or you can do it at the end when we have our question and answer period. We're excited about, next slide, Becky. So we're excited, though, this year to have so many great webinars lined up, our CoSA member webinars, those that focus on electronic records, and those that we're doing cooperatively with the National Archives as well. So we're excited about the lineup for this year, and we'll cover that toward the end. And we're glad you're joining us on this webinar and also those in the future. With the State of State Records, a report that's coming out from our surveys, I think there is only less than a handful of states who have not sent in their surveys, but if and when those get turned in, hopefully in the next couple of days, we will be able to produce that report that many of us use to kind of do peer-to-peer review of our programs with similar programs across the country. So thank you to all of you who have already sent in their surveys. We appreciate that, and for those couple that are left, we appreciate you getting those completed as well. So do want to mention our annual meeting that's going to be in Austin this year. We're really looking forward to that as well. The one item of note that I want to mention on that is that the conference spans Wednesday to Tuesday this year, which is a little different than what we've had in past years, where it's basically run weekend to weekend. We hope that that works well for most of you, and I know of at least one minor setback with one of our vendors, and we're trying to work with SAA and to work through those issues with that. But we appreciate their patience with being flexible with that as well. Anyway, I also want to thank all of the volunteer members and board members and committee chairs and all the staff members who work on CIRI and other committees for their support, our staff that are doing a great job. We look forward to everything that all of these folks are doing throughout the calendar year. We also want to say thank you to our corporate sponsors and the folks that are emeritus archivists that are continuing to participate and support CoSA in many ways, and we want to thank them for all that they're doing as well. And before I turn it over to Barbara for the Finance Committee report, I do want to encourage any State Archives employees or others if you have ideas or issues, please bring those up to a board member or to Barbara or myself so that we can work on behalf of all State Archives to accomplish those goals. So with that, I will turn the program over to Barbara, who's giving the Finance Committee report for Eric.
Thank you, John. Eric Emerson, our treasurer, does have another commitment today, so I am a very poor substitute for him to talk about the finances of CoSA. But you'll be very happy to know we have a wonderful finance committee who works very diligently to look at the budget and financial reports every month, and we also have CPA now who is our accountant. When we moved the office from Albany to Frankfurt, I had an acquaintance who's a CPA, and so she's helping us do our finances and really helping me understand more about the CoSA finances. But we had a fairly good year considering that we had some unusual expenditures. This was the first year that we had we funded a full-time executive director. Ann Ackerson had been part-time, and I'm full-time. So CoSA had, a larger investment in staff resources this year. But we also didn't use any of the reserve fund for the transition because we thought we were going to have to move money from the reserve fund to help, with the moving costs and some of the duplicate work that Anna and I were doing for the first quarter of last year. But we actually did fairly well and saved CoSA some money, and actually drove the CoSA records from Albany to Frankfurt in an enterprise truck. So she really saved us a lot of money by not doing shipping. So we were pretty judicious about using the transition funds. We also had, and this usually happens when we meet in D.C., it's a little bit more expensive because just hotel costs are expensive, and we have more people come, so the meeting costs more. And this year we actually had an extra day for some people at the meeting because of our archives on the Hill, so we were a little bit over budget with the annual meeting, but we understand why that was. We weren't like crazily spending money, so we know why that happened. And that sort of spilled over into the general operations because the annual meeting is part of the general operations budget. So with absorbing the transition costs and having the higher cost of the meeting in D.C., that's sort of what happened. And our investment funds are doing fairly well considering the ups and downs of the stock market this year. We're continuing to invest, and we're on top of our additions to the investment fund. We've made some money over the past 12 months, which is probably pretty good considering the market. So that was 2018. And Becky, the next slide is 2019. We are increasing the base dues amount this year by $250. We have never, as far as I can remember in my long years of working in the state archives and being involved with CoSA, I don't believe have ever had a dues increase. So this is our first dues increase, and it's fairly modest, and half of it does go back to the state in travel reimbursement funds for the annual meeting. And many of you probably got your dues notice yesterday from the CoSA office. So you knew the dues increase was coming. But we think this small increase, it really builds into CoSA's sustainability plan and what we're looking for the future to continue to grow CoSA staff and CoSA services by doing just incremental growth that really helps us. $250 from every state or territory really helps a lot in CoSA's operation. And the travel reimbursement does reflect the increase, which I think will help people with their travel. And we do plan that the annual meeting expenses will be back to normal. We won't have extra days built in for advocacy or for, we had the Great Ideas Exchange Day last year, which was a whole day. And this year, the annual meeting will be back to our regular work session. And everyone on the Finance Committee is really careful in looking at our investments and making sure to look on a monthly basis that we're not losing money in our investment fund. So I think we're going to have a fairly good year this year. And if you have any finance questions, let me know and I can pass them to Eric, or you could contact Eric directly. Now I'll pass it over to the Advocacy Committee chairs. It's Jim Corridan, retired from Indiana, and Dave Cheever from Maine.
Jim, you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Go for it, sir.
All righty. Let me talk to you a little bit about NHPRC, the National Historic Publications and Records Commission, and the National Archives budgets. Assuming that Washington begins to function again, both of those budgets are in good shape. we expect that. So NARA is one of the agencies, and the NHPRC's budget falls underneath that has not yet been approved by Congress, and so they are in a shutdown. But the money that both chambers of Congress has allotted for them once that part of the budget passes will put them at a solid funding level. There's no decreases in those two budgets, so we'll be good once this happens. So we're happy about that. The second item here is that NHPRC reauthorization will hopefully go forward this year, assuming that Congress can get anything passed. At the end of the last session, in the last day or so of the last congressional session, IMLS was reauthorized, which is a positive sign for us. We think we'd be much less controversial than IMLS would have been, and so we anticipate reauthorization once we can get it introduced this year when Congress begins to meet and we can work with the National Archives. So those are all real positive things that we're looking forward to get done. On collaborative advocacy, there is a joint working group comprised of the Society of American Archivists, NAGARA, RAC, which is the Regional Archives Organizations, and CoSA. And that group is working to do some follow-up after the Archives on the Hill event from this past summer in Washington. In the spring, probably in March, we will be working to reach out to congressional district offices and talk about NARA, NHPRC, reauthorization, funding, hot button issues that might be in front of the archives community that we can raise with congressional staff and hopefully have that impact the way the budget is being developed in the future. Barbara Teague, our executive director, will be attending the National Humanities Alliance Advocacy Day again this year in March, which is an opportunity for us to interact with other like-minded organizations that are doing advocacy and also get some training and up-to-date information on what's going on in Washington from a behind-the-scenes standpoint. As I mentioned, IMLS, NEH, and other federal advocacy are things that we're working on through the advocacy committee as well. And IMLS fortunately did get reauthorized, so that's a positive for them, which also affects us. CoSA gets grant funds directly from IMLS. And so we will continue to keep you apprised as things develop in the advocacy world. And with that, let me turn it over to my co-chair, Dave Cheever. Dave?
Thank you very much, Jim. And among the things that we are doing is that we are trying to position and hope to, and this is something that we're presenting to the board for its consideration, is that we want the Council of State Archivists to be regarded as a unit that is comparable to, say, NASCIO or NAS or the NGA or NAG, because we have a collection of people who are smart, they are committed to their discipline, and they are substantively contributing to our society. And we believe that our voice should be heard in Washington just as much as any of the other state leaders who are similarly designated, whether they're an attorney general or a chief information officer or a governor himself or herself. And consequently, some of the things that we may try to do will be to raise the profile of CoSA so that we are marching in sort of an order with those who share our interests and who are speaking the same language. We began, but almost by accident, in October with the Archives Awareness Month, when the National Archivist used his blog to lobby on behalf of not just the National Archives being independent or autonomous, nonpartisan, that this was not a partisan undertaking to take care of the nation's records. And that, if you recall, was in the end of, at least maybe the emergence from the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, where the National Archives was under some pressure by both sides to produce documents in a pace that was unreachable by the National Archives, and everybody's, it's got to be done tomorrow, and maybe it should have been done yesterday. Well, we felt that there was an opportunity there for us to say to the National Archives that we feel their pain, because obviously we feel from time to time that we are beset by the similar kind of demands. And he in turn responded by saying that even the state archives should be free from this kind of pressure. From there, we looked around, and among the things that we heard from folks like Steve Murray, the archivist from Alabama, was that there are other organizations out there arguing for things that are important to us. And much as we are looking at Siri and we are looking at digital archiving and we're trying to figure out how to make all of this stuff work, if we are putting material out, if we are transmitting, it seemed to make sense that we all want to be sure that what we're transmitting can be received. And at the suggestion that Steve had was at least look at the question of broadband. And when we can talk about universal broadband and making sure that our records are accessible to patrons wherever they are, and it seemed to make sense that we align ourselves with CoSA and AASLH and others to support increased broadband access. And to that end, knowing that it isn't going to happen tomorrow and it wasn't going to happen yesterday, maybe we should provide a date. And Jim actually positioned this so that the committee is looking at it and thinking that the semi-quincentennial would be a nice target date, and maybe we can propose that. And as we form this from the committee and then present it to the board, the idea that we as institutions, individual to our states, but also collective in our interest in the United States, that we start looking for something that properly can be dealt with for the semi-quincentennial, the 250th anniversary of the United States independence. So we look to coordinate with NARA. We look to coordinate with others to try to make digital archiving and the broadband, the two pillars there, as universal and as accessible as we can, and view that as part of our advocacy role because we're not there yet. And then we look at how we guard the records we have and how we recover the records we have, and that's another thing that we've done with the Advocacy Committee for the last 2.5 years. And Jody Foley has been steering that through the process, and she can talk about the Replevin piece.
Thank you. We are all aware of the terrible loss that occurs when valuable government documents illegally make their way into private hands. These kinds of losses deprive the public of access to important historical details concerning citizens' rights and community growth and development. But of course, the tracking and return of these records can be very challenging. So to address some of this, CoSA has formed a Replevin subcommittee within the Advocacy Committee, as mentioned, with the goal of updating our existing documents on Replevin, which to date have been a joint statement to eBay regarding the sale of government records and statements calling on collectors and vendors to assist in return of such records. The committee members, Jelaine Chubbs of Texas and Melanie Sturgeon of Arizona, and myself have determined that not only were these pieces in need of being updated, but we should probably take the opportunity to create some tools for CoSA members, specifically tools that will help them educate the public about Replevin issues and to develop or improve their policies and procedures. We decided the best way to do this was to create two resources, both of which are web pages, one aimed at educating the public, including providing information on why state archives are concerned with the alienation of government records and why the public should be concerned as well, the potential legal ramifications of selling or buying government records, how government records can be identified, and who they can contact if they see suspect records. The other web page, to be accessed only by CoSA members, will pull together resources for state archives to draw on in order to build their policies to locate and retrieve alienated government records. That site will include links to codes and legislation from various states related to alienated records, samples of manuals, policies, workflows, and templates, and tips from states that have been successful in getting records returned, including some great case studies with lessons learned in them. The committee has changed in its membership. We've had two folks that had serious family member issues drop out, and I'm thankful to say that things are going better for them. Karen Gray has joined us from Alaska on the committee, and I'm very grateful for her help. If anyone else is interested in working on the committee or sharing your policies, your success stories, your lessons learned, or any guidance documents that you have that you think might be helpful to your other members of CoSA, please contact me. And I'm going to put my email real quickly into chat. And I think that's it for me. So I guess I'll pass this on to Steve Excel, who'll be talking about the Development Committee.
Thank you, Jody. I want to recognize Lizette. She's the co-chair of the Development Committee with me, and she was the chair for the first half of the year, and I joined her mid-year as co-chair. In 2018, we pretty well tried to follow the sustainability plan that we adopted as an organization, and the idea is to have diverse sources of revenues to support CoSA without over-relying on dues. Dues are about a third of our income. And this year we had 50 states and territories pay up their dues. That's an incredible high watermark, and dues actually exceeded our budget by over 8%. So that is a pretty good year in terms of our membership stepping up and joining and paying their dues. Annual appeals, we usually do one in the spring and year end. We raised over $7,000, which was the target. And I think we actually had 47 donors. I think one came in after the slide was prepared. We actually had almost $3,000 raised for disaster response. So that's good news. And Barbara has all the details of where the money went, but it was spent for good purposes. In 2018, we had 7 corporate sponsors, Ancestry, Family Search, we had Apex Software, Space Saver, Preservica, Libnova, and Gaylord, and they supported a large array of CoSA projects ranging from, for example, Ancestry supporting the annual meeting work session, and Family Search has been underwriting our annual awards program. So a lot of the things you see that CoSA does is made possible by our corporate sponsors, and so please thank them when you go to the annual meeting. Barbara, next slide, Becky. Barbara mentioned the dues. When you think about it, a 10% increase is only $20 a month. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that increase does make a difference when you have all the states tipping in. So this is our first increase in CoSA's history. The idea of the sustainability plan was to have small, incremental, and predictable increases because we have a broad base of income. So that's the goal we're trying to achieve with the Development Committee. This year we plan to try to raise just as much as we raised the previous year in the appeals in the spring and in the fall. And the spring appeal may be tied to disaster recovery. We're working on that. In 2019, we'd like to add to the 7 existing corporate sponsorships, picking up another 1 or 2. Would be nice. If you have suggestions, please let us know. We'd be happy to pursue them. There are a number of companies out there that have that appear to be potentials, and if you have ideas of others and how to approach them, we would appreciate that. And then last but not least, we have not really in the past relied upon grant and foundation funding. We're looking at that. We've had on our radar screen the Knight Foundation, which is the Knight newspaper chain out of Miami, the Mellon Foundation out of New York City. Typically, foundations want to underwrite a worthy project, not so much the support of the organization's administrative costs. So we're looking at the right project and the right grant or foundation funder that might be interested in CoSA. If you have ideas for that, please let us know because we would like to pursue that. It's a new area for us. And with Ann Ackerson coming on board to help the Development Committee, we hope to move in some of these new areas like the grants and foundations and expanding our corporate sponsorship. So all in all, 2018 was a pretty good year. We're looking at 2019 being equally successful, and we appreciate everyone's contributions to the annual appeals. I know a lot of people on this call donated. Thank you for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kathy and the Education Committee.
All right, thanks, Steve. I'm going to be talking today on behalf of myself and Sean Rounds, who is the other co-chair of this committee, talking about what we've been working on and what we have in store for you all this year. First off is our slate of webinars. Each year we have a theme for our webinars. And last year, our theme was leadership and management. That was a really popular topic, and so those sessions were really well attended. We had about 650 people participate in the webinars last year. So this year for 2019, our theme will be emergency preparedness and response. And we've got a really great group of speakers lined up for this series of webinars. Next month on the 28th will be our usual Shrab Town Hall. And then in March, we kick off the theme webinars, and that one will be with Lori Foley from the Heritage Emergency National Task Force. So if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to check out our lineup of webinars on the CoSA webpage. That's located under the Programs tab, and start getting those on your calendar for the year. New last year were the Shop Talk webinars with our corporate sponsors. These webinars give our larger corporate sponsors an opportunity to showcase their work and to keep us informed about what they're doing. So those will be scheduled for sometime in the fall this year, so make sure you stay tuned for those. Last year, we also introduced our series of collaborative webinars with NARA. We do still plan on offering these quarterly webinars again this year. Unfortunately, we've had to put discussions and planning on hold for now due to the government shutdown, but hopefully we'll be able to move forward with that preparation soon, and we've got some ideas. Next slide, please. Right, next up is communications. The newsletter, which became a monthly newsletter last year called News Brief, is still going strong with over 1,000 subscribers. CoSA also has 3 listservs available to members. Information for subscribing to those lists is on the CoSA website if you aren't already subscribed. CoSA also has a strong social media presence. We're on Twitter and Facebook. Last year, we increased our Twitter followers by about 22% and increased our Facebook followers by about 9%. So if you aren't already following CoSA, I encourage you to do so and share any announcements or stories or projects from your archives with Barbara, and we'll make sure to get those shared and posted on those sites as well. And finally, we continue to offer the mentoring program for new state archivists. This is an opportunity for more seasoned state archivists to mentor incoming new state archivists, and it's been a successful program in the past. So if you're interested in being a mentor, again, please reach out to Barbara. And that's all I have for you, so I will pass this along to Tim Baker, who is going to talk about the awards committee.
Thank you, Kathy. The Council of State Archivists Awards Program acknowledges individuals, institutions, and programs that have enriched and strengthened our nation's state and territorial archives. It rewards innovative efforts and provides encouragement for the development of new and remarkable projects. It's really important that we recognize our colleagues and others in our community for the good work that they do. But it's not just about recognition for recognition's sake. By recognizing exemplary achievements, we really hope to inspire others to make similar contributions. April 1st is the 2019 deadline for submission of nominations for our spring awards. So let me run through them really quickly. We have 5 awards that are coming up on this April 1 deadline, and we would encourage you to consider nominating a colleague, a staff member, a state archives leader, or for one of these 5 awards by the April 1 deadline. The first award is the Victoria Irons Walsh Leadership Award. It recognizes sustained leadership and outstanding contributions of an individual or an institution to the development of state and territorial archives or to CoSA. The second award is the Victoria Irons Walsh Emerging Leader Travel Stipend. It is there to encourage the development of an emerging leader in state and territorial archives, and the stipend will provide up to $1,000 for an individual to attend our annual meeting. The third award that I'd like you to consider nominating someone for is the Advocacy for Archives Award, which acknowledges an individual or an organization that has made significant contributions to efforts by state and local government archives to ensure the preservation and availability of the American historical record. The fourth award is the Rising Star Award, which acknowledges outstanding contributions by individual staff members or teams to their state archives or their constituencies. And last but certainly not least, the CoSA NHPRC Shrab Award of Merit. This award is given to a State Historical Records Advisory Board, or SHRAB, project or program that resulted in strengthening the condition or access of documents and records within the state. Finally, just as an aside, I will mention the CoSA Ancestry Leadership Award, which we're really thankful for Ancestry support in providing for this award $1,000 reimbursement for individuals and $2,000 for groups for mid-level managers and archives to develop their professional potential. That award is given out later in the year. The time frame for that is November 1, so we'll put out a word about that later on this fall. So wrapping up the 2019 nominations schedule, again, the deadline is April 1. Please consider nominating anyone or an organization that you think worthy. We have already established a good committee to review the applications and make recommendations to the board. We will do so at their April meeting and hope to notify the award recipients by April 30 so that at the August meeting in Austin, Texas, we'll be able to formally present those awards. So with that, I turn it over to, who do I turn that over to?
Turn it over to Siri. I'll take it.
Siri, sorry.
No problem. This is Sarah Kuntz, and Alan Ramsey and I are going to give some updates on the State Electronic Records Initiative. We currently are serving as the co-chairs of that overall initiative. So I'll start with a couple of notes highlighting the overall work of Siri, and then Alan will dive into some highlights from each of the subcommittees. So first of all, let me start by mentioning our major grant that we are still working with. It's a grant from IMLS. It's called Implementing Access, and that really focuses on outreach to specific partners, records creators, custodians, and other allies and allied organizations, and working with them to create some tools and other resources that will be of use to all of our communities regarding the creation and preservation and use of electronic records. So with that in mind, a couple of big products that have recently come out in support of that grant include the State Archiving in the Digital Era Playbook from NASCIO. That's the Association of State CIOs. So that is a great resource that we put out together with them, and in fact, they just mentioned it in their partner briefing that they did with NASCIO and all of their allied organizations just earlier this week. So it's been a great resource that is available on our website. That tool is designed for you to discuss preservation strategies for electronic records jointly with your state IT environment and the archives. The other group that we've been working quite extensively with in the last few months has been the National Governors Association, and we put out a couple of documents for them, short, easy to digest documents that they felt like were in a format their members could find easily accessible, and those covered topics about transitioning into and out of governor's offices and what to do with your records, and then also about developing a social media use policy for state government and for governor's offices. And in addition to what you see on the slide, we also did a webinar with NGA jointly to discuss with their membership issues of surrounding transitions and just general record keeping best practices. So that was a very successful joint event with them as well. Next slide. And then another overall thing that we're working on right now under the bigger CIRI umbrella is we have a partnership with Preservica to look and undertake a research project, really looking at what kind of legacy electronic records are out there in our environments, and that could be in a state agency, that could be in the archives. You know, what challenges do we have around them, and what are some plans going forward? So we sent out, you may remember, a little pre-survey to help us kind of narrow down the scope of what we were going to be asking of our membership and of our partner organizations. And that for the 35 of you that answered, that was very helpful data. It helped us focus in on where we want to kind of hit our subsequent questions to be a little bit more direct and not have such open-ended, you know, what are your problems with electronic records, and be a little bit more focused. So with that in mind, we're working with Preservica to develop the survey in the next month that will concentrate on electronic records resources that would come from other agencies. And so some of that came from the questions that you answered in the pre-survey. And then we're looking for our partner organizations, some of them that we're working with on the Access Grant to help us with this survey. So more on that to come. And with that, I'm going to let Alan give us some information about the individual CIRI subcommittees.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. So the Tools and Resources Subcommittee, co-chaired by Nick Canizio from Vermont and Alejandra Dean from Massachusetts. The subcommittee has been doing a lot of work with the National Governors Association documents, helping Michelle, who has helped us draft those, which was great, and then review those to make sure that we're providing the right kind of information and getting them to the next level for the steering committee to look at and to get them out to the National Governors Association and to the governor's offices. That's been really great, and we continue to do that kind of work with documents. We're working on a few right now on text messaging and voice messaging and things of that nature. We continue to work, the subcommittee continues to work on the CoSA Resource Center, which some of you may remember was the PERTS portal back a few years ago. We broadened it to include more than just electronic records. This group really focuses in on the electronic records part and making sure that the Resource Center, that the links are correct, that we're getting more resources, and as always, if you have resources, please submit them or let myself know, or Sarah or Barbara know that you have resources, because the more we get in there, the better it is, and it's fairly straightforward to get stuff in there. So those who have submitted stuff, thank you. We're also doing some more best practice documents in 2019, so we'll keep in tune to those coming out. If you may remember about a year or so ago, we did one on digitization project management, so we're looking, the subcommittee is looking to continue the series. And next slide, Becky. So Education and Training Subcommittee, Bonnie Weddle, New York, and Catherine Behringer from Maryland are the co-chairs. They have put together through June the webinar schedule, a lot of really great topics coming up, such as the Kane email project, one on internet quorum. So the next one is in February 19th, so please go to the website and get signed up for those. A lot of great information there. They're also working on basic digital preservation training recordings. They took some of the Institute materials that we did several years ago, and including training given in Puerto Rico by Sarah Kuntz and Sarah Grimm, and have made those as basic recordings. And I want to thank Elizabeth Perks from Utah for lending her voice and expertise in doing that. They're a really great resource, so definitely check those out. And they're looking to do other trainings and training recordings in the coming months. Next slide, Becky. Advocacy Outreach, co-chaired by Christian Skipper from Maryland and Patsy Mitchell from Tennessee. The subcommittee on Advocacy Outreach has been really, again, they focused in on electronic records today, getting it pushed all over the world through social media. Had a lot of great pickup again. We even had some repurposing of electronic records day material for the National Governors Association for their briefing for new governors, which was great. They're also doing expanding and continuing with the Spotlight program to highlight the work of the archives and digital preservation on the CoSA blog. So if you have something you're doing, they're always looking for Spotlight articles, so definitely be in touch with us about if you have ideas for that. And supporting a larger social media presence series, so getting Twitter tweets ready to go and Facebook posts ready to go and things of that nature. And as always, if you have any staff members interested in these committees, let Barbara or Sarah or myself know. We always welcome help. I want to thank everyone who's been involved. We've done a lot of work the last year, and we have a lot of work coming up. So I'm going to pass it now to Veronica Martzel to talk about the state of records report.
Thank you, Alan. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction. Thank you to all of you who completed the biannual Archives and Records Management State of the State survey. As of the time this slide was made, we had a pretty good response rate of 47 states and 3 territories. And I'm very pleased to say that actually just 2 days ago, we had another territory go ahead and submit their survey. So I am cautiously optimistic that we will get very, very close, if not 100% response for that. A little bit of a preview of some of the initial results. I'd just like to highlight that overall, looking at some of the staffing questions that you answered, it looks like there's some good stability moving forward with staffing levels and a significant increase in staff devoting all or some of their time to digital preservation. I think where we are with this survey now is going to give us a great opportunity to look back at some of the previous surveys and maybe parse out some longitudinal trends that we're seeing within our staffing, within our resource allocation, and how we're approaching our work on a day-to-day basis. So much more to come on this, but just a quick little preview. Thank you.
So now is the time for you to ask any questions. If you have them, you can put them in the chat box. There, just type those and I think hit enter, and everyone should be able to see those. Becky has added some links to the things that have been referenced today in that same chat box for your convenience. So thank you, Becky, for doing that. Great coverage from all of our presenters today to do that in a precise fashion. We covered a lot of territory in 45 minutes. But you can see all the great work that's being done by each of the committees and staff and the executive committee as well. So, well, if there are not any questions, I think we have a couple more slides. Is that right? So, Barbara, are you going to talk about this?
Yes, I will. I'm just going to go over a couple of announcements for everyone. So thank you, John, and thanks to all the presenters. I think you can see from all of the people that we had that are representative of so many committees working on our behalf. It's great to have so many volunteers. So we thank you all, and thanks for being here with us today. I wanted to give you a little preview of the CoSA SAA annual meeting in Austin this summer. This is very tentative, so don't really count on these dates. We're still working on the dates, but we will send the confirmed dates out in February. As John mentioned earlier, the meeting actually runs from July 31st to August 6th, which is a Wednesday through a Tuesday, and Wednesday through Friday are basically pre-conference days. And so what we probably will end up is have our work session on Saturday afternoon, which would mean you'd be working on Saturday, which you probably have done before in your reference room. So we're just going to see how this goes this year. And then the program sessions go Sunday through Tuesday, and we're still working on getting our business meeting scheduled, our silent auction scheduled, our with the State Historical Records Advisory Board Roundtable Group meeting. But that's generally the outline, but we're still working with the SAA office on refining some of the times and the dates. So this is not really, it's very tentative. So don't really believe everything that you read here, but just that gives you a general idea of what the meeting is going to be like. Next slide, please, Becky. Thank you. Ooh, our slide's a little wonky. We're, as Kathy mentioned when she was talking about the member webinars this year, the emergency preparedness is the theme, and we have some of our regularly scheduled webinars that we have annually, the Shrab Town Hall and the advocacy meeting or the advocacy webinar in April after we're in DC to do some advocacy work in March. So those are all on the schedule. Of course, we were scheduled out through October, but we didn't want to burden you with the titles of all of those. But you can actually go to CoSA's website and pre-register for these webinars. Go ahead and get them on your calendar so you don't have to wait to do it every month. If you just go ahead and use the webinar registration, I think Becky put that over in the chat box for both the CoSA webinars and the Siri webinars. That simplifies your life for the next 8 months or so. Next slide, please. And we also have our regularly scheduled Siri webinar series, the State Electronic Records Initiative, thanks to Bonnie Weddle and Catherine Behringer, who is just starting as the co-chair. So thank you for working on these webinars for us. They're more technically oriented than some of our member webinars, but you will always learn something. The Siri webinar registration page explains if you need prerequisites or if you'll be uncomfortable, if it's going to be too technical. But please just come along and register for these and listen and learn, and everyone's welcome to attend these. And we'll probably have a few more later on in the year. We really just have these scheduled through June, but you can go to the website and go ahead and pre-register for those. And we'll probably take a break for the summer and then come back with a couple more in the fall. Next slide, please. And we have a couple of exciting things in the next 6 weeks, and then I wanted to make sure that you knew about all the conference dates that are coming up. Endangered Data Week is coming, and at the end of February, the 1st of March, Sunshine Week. We usually participate in those, particularly led by the Siri Advocacy and Outreach Committee, does a lot of work on both of those events. The CoSA board will be meeting for its mid-year meeting in D.C. on the 24th and 25th of March. We'll have our regular Washington briefing on the 25th, where we invite many of our partners who are headquartered in D.C. or who sometimes come from other places to come to our partner briefing, and then we'll do a little bit of advocacy work while we're there as well. And I think many of you have probably seen the call for proposals for the Best Practices Exchange, which is going to be in Columbus, Ohio at the end of April, the 1st of May. The deadline was extended for proposal submission, so if you haven't had a chance to submit a proposal, those aren't due until February 1st. I'm sure you're like me and you appreciated that extension. So we're hoping to see many of our CoSA members there. We usually have a fairly good representations, particularly of some of our Siri colleagues who are there to share information about ongoing projects, and it really is a good conference if you can swing it to go. And then the Nagara conference, our colleagues in Nagara are having their conference in St. Paul at the end of July, and then CoSA SAA follows with its annual meeting, joint annual meeting at the end of July, the 1st of August. And next slide, please. Thank you. And of course, we wouldn't be here without our sponsors and funders. We appreciate everyone all of our corporate sponsors who are really our friends and partners in so many ways. We have Ancestry that works on many projects with us and also is a major sponsor of our annual meeting. Family Search that sponsors our awards program, and Preservica, who's now working with us on this research project to look at the digital backlog, and APPX Software, which usually sponsors a couple of events at the annual meeting. LibNova, a new sponsor to CoSA last year. We're not really sure what they're going to sponsor this coming year or this year that we're in, but we're very happy to have them aboard. Gaylord Archival, who's been our partner in helping provide supplies to the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico after the hurricanes, and Space Saver as well. And, of course, our two federal funders, as Sarah mentioned, we have major grants now from the Institute of Museum and Library Services National Leadership Grant Program. And, of course, NHPRC has funded projects for us for several years, and we hope many more in the future. Next slide, please. And we want you to stay connected with us. We have our website, our resource center, which those of you who've been around for several years may remember as the PERTS portal. We decided to rename it and make it a little more universal and expand that. Our Twitter use is growing, as is our Facebook page, and our YouTube actually hosts all of CoSA's recorded webinars. So if you want access to a webinar from several years ago, they're all going to be on our YouTube channel. Now, I'm really excited to say that we actually are going to revitalize our Instagram account, which currently has one post from 2016, but we're getting ready with the help of the CIRI Advocacy and Outreach Committee and Amanda Myers from Illinois to revitalize our Instagram page. So we're pretty excited about that. So be watching for Instagram, and we'll let you know. We'll let you know when we're actually up and running on Instagram. I know several of you have Instagram sites, so we'll be looking to follow you and see what we can do with sharing our information together. And we only have one more slide, I believe, and we do appreciate you coming today. We appreciate all our speakers. I think we've had a really good overview of the work that goes on behind the scenes in CoSA and the many people that contribute to making our organization what it is. And we want to make sure that for the rest of the year we're able to be responsive to your needs and webinars or anything else that you need, really. So if you would take some time to give us a little bit of feedback about the webinar today. Yeah, I know for those of you who've been on these webinars before, you know you're going to end up, when you sign off, you'll be taken to our evaluation page. And we really would appreciate it if you would take the time to do an evaluation for us. It helps us know what we need to change, what we can tweak, if you have ideas for other webinars. In fact, we came up with this emergency preparedness idea from looking at the evaluations over the past couple of years, and that sort of rose to the top. So you can help us pick our theme for next year, or if you're looking for any special webinars, do let us know. We really would appreciate it if you would take the time to do that. I want to say thanks again to our speakers for such outstanding presentations and for being such dedicated volunteers to CoSA. It makes my job so much easier, and they're working on behalf of all of us to improve state archives, so we really appreciate all of you. Please do complete this evaluation. We appreciate you for joining us today, and we're looking forward to seeing you at our CIRI webinar in February and also our CoSA member webinar. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.